Welcome to another episode of As Jess Recommends. Today we will talk about Oasis from 2002 from my favorite South Korean director Lee Chang-dong. Again, I've seen all of his features. Okay, he has a very small body of work that you could go through in a weekend because there are only 6 films. I think all of them are good, they're very interesting and very provocative. So this film is about say unconventional love story. There is this guy who gets out of a prison and he has like a very, let's say, interesting personality. It's hard to describe. And then he starts going to this apartment where this woman lives who has cerebral palsy. And then they start a relationship. And I'll have to give a trigger warning with this film as kind of how their relationship starts as a very kind of problematic element. I don't want to kind of spoil it too much, but there is this scene of like attempted rape in this film, and it's really problematic. And also, this film you can analyze that it kind of implies that a woman might want that, and it's obviously very problematic when a male, especially when a male director does that, and that's unfortunately a very kind of prominent part of, I think, in some Asian countries of their culture, that you have these films where they show this kind of sexual violence and stuff, and they kind of imply that women actually like that, and that's obviously a very problematic and awful thing. And I think this film would have been better if it didn't have that thing. But then everybody can decide themselves whether that kind of 2 minute scene ruins the whole film or whether they can like the film overall. And maybe we'll talk about that later in the spoiler section because I think that's an interesting conversation to have in general. But what I like about Lee Chang-dong as a director in general is that he showcases these people that we don't often see in films, very flawed people, and again, not the Abercrombie ad type of people or the action mans or Barbies, but actual real people with lots of issues. Whether in this film we have like one of the characters can have like you could say mental disability, and the other one has a physical disability, and they are trapped by that. So often we don't see that in films. So I really appreciate when directors are willing to showcase people that you don't often see. And I think Lee Chang-dong is a director who doesn't really judge these characters himself that much, but he just shows them and lets the viewers decide what to make of the characters. And I also like that aspect of his films. And even though this film has that problematic element, I think it's one of his best films and one of his most thought-provoking films. And I've often said that if I was a filmmaker myself, Lee Chang-dong would be a director I would take lots of inspiration from. Mostly, again, the fact that I would also want to explore these type of characters that you don't often see in films and try to have empathy for them and also let lots of room for different interpretations. But anyway, now I could ask Altaz what he thought of this film.
So I will start by saying, Crom, I have failed you again. My bias has not allowed me to fully appreciate this film. No, I think everything you're saying is correct and very interesting in the way that there are a lot of things that this film does that are very interesting and important. I just this time around I just couldn't I couldn't fully there are certain things about the film that prevented me from fully getting immersed in it. So that I think that's the challenge I experienced. But it wasn't because of the problematic element, although that is not saying because that's not problematic to me. That is, but that didn't really stop it. I think there are some questions that I felt were answered for me that I would have really appreciated in the film. So I think that the discussion is going to be an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. Soon we will have like you liking less than 80% of the films, and then we cannot be friends anymore.
No,
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 I'm just kidding. Like obviously
no.
it doesn't matter. that much. And obviously with you, I know that you don't hate this, or I mean, hate is too strong a word, but you don't like, you aren't critical of these films, kind of just to be critical, but you always have like good reasons to have problems with these films, because of course some people might just say that's so pretentious, I hate it, but you aren't like that, so I don't mind that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and like I said, I always feel like it's my failure. Like I'm like, I haven't been able to grasp exactly, but there maybe it's just sometimes I have questions, like even with Kotoko. But as we discussed, I kind of started seeing that okay, while I may have preferred certain things in what this film's attempting to do, its focus is elsewhere. So it actually helps me clarify, because I think what like you said, that's why it's like to say, oh, I hate this film or I didn't like this film. That doesn't work, because it's like it's generally you have to understand what something is trying to do, and sometimes that's not always clear for me, and so the dialogue helps, because for you it's clear what it's trying to do and it's working. So I'm really interested in learning that perspective, that how you see it, because already the way you were talking about it made me kind of think about it a little bit differently. So yeah, it's gonna be enjoyable. So
But now we can discuss kind of what type of people would like this film. So I think there is one thing here that again many people might find also problematic. In addition to the other problematic thing is that we don't have that many like likable characters here, or any likable characters, and many people again say that they cannot enjoy a film or a story in general if it doesn't have any likable characters. But I'm very opposite of that. That I don't really care, to be honest, because I think world is full of people who aren't very likable. So I think it would be like very kind of unrealistic and not true to humanity if every single film was filled with likable characters and not these types of people. And if every story had like a hero and a villain, I think that would be such a stupid and kind of a childish thing, and very kind of surface level understanding of what the uh, human populace looks like. And it's also like very surface level understanding of morality if we only saw like likable characters in every single story.
yeah, I mostly agree with that. I think you're right. You don't have to like every uh, character. Um, but to me, there are two things that are important. Either you help the audience find some of the likability, some of the heart in that person, or you help the understanding of that person. So, like, for example, like, yes, I know it's a favorite film of yours, like Naked, which I also really enjoyed when I saw it. So it's like a person is wholly, could be in some ways like wholly despicable, but you can, if you can understand some of what he's struggling with, even though it's not necessarily through introspection, it helps. I think here what was really good, what you mentioned, which I felt as well, is that yeah, clearly he has some issues himself. This is a love story, and we can talk about the love story aspect, but this is a love story between two people who are wholly ignored by society, right? One is normal appearing enough that everyone is like, why can't you just be like everyone else, be responsible, this, and this, and just get on with life? Because he doesn't have cerebral palsy, so it's not that visible other than his anxiety, his always tapping his legs, always his restlessness. So it's clearly there's something going on with him, um, and some developmental stuff that have probably not been supported in his life, and instead he's just seen as a bad seed. So that chastising. And then on the other end, a very obvious case because of this cerebral palsy, she's completely seen as a non-entity, non-person, non-human, non-woman, non-everything. And on top of that, she's totally being used for the benefits she can provide, but otherwise being left. So I think there are some really interesting commentary going on in this film. Yeah, between the two. Yeah.
And I think we've already kind of gone into spoilers a little bit, so now we can kind of officially go into the spoiler territory, and maybe we'll just jump straight into the themes, as I think the aesthetic here is like really kind of basic. I mean, I don't have that much to say about the aesthetic, but we can cover that at some point in the conversation a little bit. But I do think that again the main character, obviously he has some hard and likable qualities, even like obviously it's hard to see that like after the problematic scene of the attempted rape, but when we see how he like actually cares for this woman, and he's the only one who is willing to spend lots of time with her and take her to places and see the world and not just be stuck in that apartment.
Yeah.
And he's like again answering her questions and having discussions with her, making jokes and everything. So in a way, like after that rape scene, like he treats her really well, and kind of I really don't know why he wanted to have that rape scene here, because it kind of dilutes everything else in a way. Maybe the film would have been better if it didn't have that. Maybe you could have done some kind of other like a weird thing that how they meet each other, but you don't have to do that rape thing there.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, but I'm trying to understand the maybe what Lee Chang-dong is trying to say. So this guy, and I'm not saying this is correct, but he's saying this guy's so desperate, he's so miserable, he's so outsmarted, I guess, by society in a way to say it. Like he can't compete at all, right? Given who he is. Clearly he has some kind of way of thinking and seeing the world that is not where the world or society runs. And then he's out of prison and he's almost kind of desperate. And I think that's where you get into the wrong. Okay. Because it's like, just because you are in prison for 2.5 years or you haven't been with a woman or whatever, it just doesn't seem to connect to me, like you said, where he goes driven. And I guess the argument is some people can be that vulnerable. So he can be driven to the point where he's just so like, oh, I just want the company of the woman. And there's this one. But clearly, yeah, this is the issue. This is where I don't get the film, right? In one way, I can see that what he's trying to say is he's the only one who sees her as a woman. Or is he kind of seeing her as a woman that he can essentially have sex with? Right? Because in society, he's going to be seen as a criminal. He's broke. He doesn't have a job. So he can't really get a woman. So, but I can get this woman. Now, this is where I'm like a little bit confused about the film, and a little more depth would have helped us understand, like you're saying, like what is his interest in the woman? Because we see that the interest is first he comes there and he's guilty, and then he thinks she's interesting. Then there's sexual interest, and to the point where it's problematic, and then it turns into this more genuine interest. But I have some comments on that too, or questions, I would say. So yeah, that just left me a bit confused as to what are we exploring.
And I think one of the interesting things here is to kind of analyze you could say the moral compass of this male character, or
Yeah.
whether he is intelligent enough to have a moral compass. because obviously
That's a
we
good
see
point.
that maybe he isn't. I mean, he isn't very intelligent. He has very low IQ, to put it like in a stupid way. So I think maybe he just doesn't have enough kind of. I mean, this sounds like very condescending, like brain capacity to like understand morality in a way that the average person has. And obviously, we can see kind of in many ways how he doesn't understand the kind of etiquette of how to act around people. Like he's always kind of imposing himself on other people and kind of bothering them and annoying them, and he doesn't like really understand like that maybe sometimes you should actually leave people alone and stuff. And I feel like I've met lots of this type of people
Oh,
in my life, and in like London when you walk around and like around like a tube station or something, you always have this type of like couple of these types of
that's true. That's
guys
true.
around there, and they might kind of come to you and like act like very weirdly and just randomly start talking some nonsense to you and things like that. And of course, like we see how people react to him, that they are very rude to him and kind of um, yeah, very rude to him and stuff. And obviously, that's kind of an understandable reaction. That's not how I would react to this type of people, but I can kind of relate to the other people in a way that I've met this type of people and kind of been a bit kind of, you could say, scared and stuff. That what is this person gonna do and stuff? Like, is he gonna like start following me or things like that? So yeah, I feel like I've met so many people like this in my life, like just randomly like walking in a city center or whatever.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with you. I do agree with you. And on a personal level, yeah, I have a lot of feeling and empathy for that because, like you said, I think the film. Yeah, I think it's interesting because it's like it's a love story, but I'm not sure it's a love story. It might be a question. It might be like who's really there for certain people. If you are ignored by your family, if you're ignored by your society, if you don't get the support you need, or like you're saying, what if you are functioning at a level where you can't fully understand morality or the rules of society? Are you to blame for your actions? Now, obviously, from a legal standpoint, of course, you have to be able to appreciate your actions. So, does he fully appreciate what he's doing? So, there's definitely that ambiguity. Does he really appreciate what he's doing? Uh, but yet, he has the honor to take, well, I don't know. Maybe he doesn't have the honor. Maybe he took the fall for his brother because uh, he he was told he's nothing and his life is not worth as much as his brother's. So he's like, okay, well, I might as well go in, and maybe that made him worse. So I think there's a lot of maybes, and I think that's where the difficulty in the film can be, is that there are a lot of maybes, and the thing is that maybe I see that Lee Chang Dong doesn't want to do the character any favors, like you said. He's not trying to create moments of likability. He's trying to push the gas and say, what if you didn't like him at all? And what if you can't stand him? Like, this is the thing. Like, that's the hard part when he's that hyper and he's that agitating and he's that irresponsible. And not only that, his impression of what he should do for this girl is just make sure she has some fun. Okay, which is good. We all need to have fun and experience life. But I feel like, is that his immaturity or is that our societal immaturity that that's what we think love is? Because what they also need is stability, companionship, and all that kind of stuff. So he totally fails the girl in that way because he gives her a bunch of excitement and, gives her what she needs physically or tries to give her what she needs physically, but he's failed there because she has now ended up back even further oppressed stuck in this apartment, and he's kind of failed them. So I don't know what that means.
Yeah, and I started thinking you mentioned also the kind of legal element, but I don't know what's the word in English, but at least in Finland we have this idea that some people, like even though they commit like a horrible crime, they don't have to go to prison when they do the mental
Yeah,
checkup in the police station or whatever, because they were in a mental state that they weren't kind of responsible for what they did. And then of course we can get into the idea of like determinism and free
mm,
will, that whether it's just our kind of brain chemistry and like our genes and stuff that determine all of our actions, and whether we actually have a choice on what we do. And then we can get to into the questions that like about all like the prison system and legal system, if we don't have free will and like responsibility for what we do. But then I also, okay, we talked about the woman here a bit, but yeah, I think she can just falls in love with him, or whether she falls in love with him, but I think it's just because he's the only one who has given her
yeah, 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 yeah.
interest, and she can then maybe look
Mm,
past that rape, and she probably, as she doesn't have experience with these types of things, maybe she thinks that like with the
mm,
attempted rape that he was just trying to like show her affection, I guess, or something, because she just doesn't have any experience with these types of things, and like an like many other people would, because she's just been confined in this house maybe her whole life, and she doesn't have the same experiences in any way than like your regular person who doesn't have a disability would have.
yeah,
So her mind is very interesting to explore through that as well. But of course, we can see in the film that she's like a very much normal person in terms of her mind, that she again has like a normal intelligence and things like that. She's just trapped by her body. And then we see the kind of contrast here with the character, one trapped by her body and one trapped by his mind.
mm,
Again, the low
yeah,
intelligence and that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I definitely see that. Yeah, I definitely can appreciate that what you're saying. Yes, those are very, very good points, and I agree with you. And I think this is the thing, is that clearly Lee Chang-dong is like walking a really, yeah, he's skating on thin ice. He's walking on like this line, and of course these are things we don't like to think about. So like you said, I do agree with you that he is forcing you to ask certain things, in the value is there, but then there are these confusing elements, and maybe they should be confusing, like you said, because obviously he assaults her, and then what she remembers of the assault is that he called her pretty, and that's yeah, I mean, like you're saying, now there's the whole question. Well, and this is, I think this is a problematic element. If someone doesn't show you sexual interest because you have cerebral palsy and you're not even seen as a woman, and then some man attempts to basically assaults you, and in that calls you pretty, and you are so taken by the fact that someone actually recognized you as an attractive sexual being, that, I mean, he's, I applaud him in a, well, I mean, I in a way like admire that he was gonna put it all on the line with such tricky, problematic areas. But yeah, as an audience, it's really hard to understand. And obviously, he switches at a, right. He's very volatile, right? So he ends up assaulting another woman at the end for a different reason in a different way, but he assaults her, and he doesn't think even a second about it, and he immediately goes to cut the tree. So I think it's insane in some ways, because it's like it's so back and forth that you don't know what to think of this guy. I mean, he's very violent. He's irresponsible. He also is compulsively lying in some ways, because doesn't eat at that restaurant, says I don't have money. He eats and says I don't have money, but then he goes and buys her flowers and a fruit basket. So clearly he has some money. And there's some like a lot of weird things going on in a way that made it really hard for me to to feel like I was flowing through the film.
And then we of course hear about his kind of crime history, his criminal record, and there was like one like attempted rape there as well.
Yeah, yeah,
So he has done it, I guess, multiple times and maybe sometimes when he hasn't even gotten caught. And then we of course learn that the latest criminal thing that he did that got him into prison was actually done by his brother. So we kind of see that he has some kind of, at least the capability to feel affection and love to a certain degree with people because he goes to prison for his brother. And there's the scene when he buys that jumper for her mother and things like that. So there are these certain elements where he seems like an affectionate person, but then the film flips this thing so many times that we have the attempted rape, then when he assaults that woman later on and takes her cell phone and all these things. So like, although maybe it just shows how, again, morality exists in this gray area, that all people, again, we have the darker sides, but at the same time we are capable of doing good things, and that people again aren't either good or bad, which is obviously true, but it does that in a fairly extreme way because obviously your average person is not gonna want to rape anybody or anything like that, but maybe in the way that it does it in a more extreme way, it kind of emphasizes these themes better in a way.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that there, I guess, what this film might be getting to is our imputing of motive. So again, we're going into like kind of legal territory, almost like our imposition of motive in determining if something is good or bad. So he he took the fall for his brother, but like you're saying, if he has certain developmental issues, you can be operating at a level where it's very easy to gaslight you and make you do something. So it might not have been for a feeling for his brother, but the fact that they gaslit him and they basically said, your life is worth nothing. He has a wife and children to support. So I think that that is important because one thing that is in there is that what we value, and we see this going on even, in current politics. Certain kind of people have more value in society. If you're part of a conventional heterosexual marriage, you're worth more. You're worth more to society. If you have children, you're worth more to society. If you're employed, you're worth more to society. And if you're not any of those things, then you're not worth as much to society. So this dual class citizenship. So it is playing at that a bit because it's like, yeah, you go to prison because you're worthless. Now, he might, it's not 100% clear to me. Is it feeling filial piety, the reason why he did it, or because he was gaslit? And I don't know. It seems like Lee Chang-dong was not interested in that. He's like, this is what happened. What do you think? Does this person? So it's a kind of a harsh film in a way, right? Because it's asking us to judge in a in a way where a lot is taken away from you. I'm not going to tell you whether he really did it because he loves his brother. I'm not really going to tell you what his kind of his continuing interest in this girl is about. Is it his desperation? Is it his uh, acuity? Uh, is it his loneliness, or is he just like living in an alternate reality where he just sees her as not having cerebral palsy, and is that good or bad? Like I think that level of ambiguity and walking those lines can, on top of not making a character that's that redeemable in some ways, like you said, because of how he just flows back and forth from being like doing something okay and then doing something like really terrible, and just he removes all those things that in a film would help you feel a certain way about a character. So it makes it an extremely challenging film. Uh, I have to say, yeah.
Yeah, and I think obviously he's also a very impulsive person, that he again does things before he thinks about them, and then there are all these consequences because he never thought that what this and this action could cause. And I started thinking that again maybe he isn't like attracted to the woman because he is in love with her, but more because he sees himself in her, because they both have this like again disdain from society. They both don't belong to society. They are both again they both have families, but in a way they are the kind of black sheep of the family, and the family kind of ignores them in a way and wants them to go to like the dark corner and not like exist very prominently in their lives, in a way that they just go there. I don't wanna, you are my family, but I don't wanna deal with you that much because you're constantly doing something that affects my life in a negative way. So these families of both of the characters aren't very affectionate towards these characters that have these disabilities.
Yeah, and I that part I definitely connected with, and I did appreciate that what you're saying, because I liked that aspect of it, that the connecting thread is being the outsiders, being slightly different, maybe slightly. And see, again, we do end up in a lot of tripwires, right? Because to say that because there's something quote unquote not normal, you're normal about you, then you're not uh, accepted. But I think that at a certain point we have to understand that yes, that can be a connecting thing. They are both on the outside, so he could feel her outsideness more than anyone else could because he was also on the outside. But like you said, he was like more masked. It was harder for people to tell because he didn't have these physical defects. And I don't want to say defect, so I don't even know the right word to say. She doesn't have that. Sorry, I mean doesn't have that physical condition. Um, because he doesn't have the physical condition, he's more difficult to see as the same. But their struggle is the same, like you said. So that being a connecting thing. But what did you make of the where they have fantasies and then they almost have these like umbrellas of Sherbug more moments where it's like she's now normal and she's singing to him, and I get that that's her, that could be her desire, but then that can also be problematic because you are saying that the normative is the thing to be desired. What everyone should desire is to be normative, not their version of.
Yeah, but I think it's just her fantasy, and I don't think the film is trying to say that everybody should strive to be again normative or normal. I think it's just her fantasy in her head, what she would want to do if she could. But yeah, and I think again many people who are different obviously have these fantasies. I mean, I can even relate to that myself in a way, that sometimes you think that why I'm such a weirdo, and like why can't I like Taylor Swift as much as the Swifties and just belong with them, and like even in these like very basic
Yeah, yeah,
ways, and why do I have to be so anxious? Why can't I act like a normal person, and whatever. So I think that's a very relatable thing here, and I think we have many of these also like more heartfelt scenes, like towards the end when he climbs to the tree, and because she's scared of the tree shadow in her wall, and then he tries
yeah.
to cut off the tree branches and stuff. So that's kind of a heartfelt moment in an intense way, and then there's the Indian like style painting, and that like how they talk about that. So there are these kind of moments of heartfelt and more kind of, I guess, scenes where we can start maybe liking these characters a bit more than we do in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I think this movie creates so many like interesting questions to ask. I'm gonna ask you another fun question. So, Lee Chang-dong being someone who, let's say, on a general level, but I don't know internally, he might feel like an outcast himself. But let's say, on a general level, he's fairly what we would call normal. What is normal is, I'm not going to go into all that. I don't mean normal and to offend against anyone who's not, because God knows I'm not normal. So him making a film about these characters, is it a bit, I can't think of another word besides this, condescending? It's just a question. I know it's a deep question, but it's one of those debate questions that's just kind of fun to ask.
I mean, I don't think it's condescending. Like I said in the beginning, I think he kind of doesn't really take a side himself or trying to really kind of harshly or rigidly do something with the film, but more just he's more of
Yeah.
a person who asks questions rather than answers the questions themselves. So, and I think asking questions, it's not condescending, but it's very healthy, even whether those questions are a bit kind of outside the box or whatever. I don't think it's condescending to ask questions. But I think
Yeah, I
his
agree.
previous films to this is again called Peppermint Candy, and it has the same male actor in it. And in that film, he is like awful, like not relatable person as well. So that will be interesting to discuss at some
Yeah,
point
that'll be
too. And he
interesting.
has this kind of, I guess, style where he always has these characters that aren't very likable. Like in Secret Sunshine, the main character goes through lots of tragedies, but she isn't very likable. Okay, usually when we see a film where a character goes through tragedies, the main character is quite likable, who we feel for, but in that film, she isn't that likable. And then in his latest film, Burning, again, the characters are not very likable either. So I guess that's just a part of his style. And I think one thing to mention about him is too that he started as a writer rather than a director, and he wrote, I think, some books, and then he became a director later. So I think there's some kind of literary influence in his work a lot as well. And that's maybe why we really kind of get deeply into these characters' heads and start analyzing the psychological side to them, as that's kind of often what we do in literature, where we hear the inner monologues and stuff. But here it is done in a bit of a different way. So,
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think it's just one of those more like fun thought, like things to think about, because it comes up over and over. And I've heard in the context of even, like, let's say, like really intelligent actors who then have to play characters who are not of the same background or level of education and whatnot, and then some people might say that that actor plays that kind of character in a way that he or she is actually seems to be almost laughing at the character they're playing. Not, there's a kind of, oh yeah, ironic way they're playing that character, because they are not, the way they're looking at them is that because they're like less intelligent, they're not in a warm way, but they're kind of being ironic about it. So I think that's always interesting, and there are differing views. When I hear comments like that, I don't necessarily feel that actor did that, but it's the same as when we are also going to discuss Bellatar. So obviously Bellatar writes these characters that can be very crude or crass or certain, like, and we know that he's highly intellectual and highly intelligent by what film he's actually making. So it's always kind of interesting to ask the question that when they do that artistic exercise, do they succeed in what they're trying to do, or is there sometimes does it come across not what they intended and stuff like that? It's an interesting question to ask, because we're kind of losing that nuance nowadays too, where we say the art must be created or performed exactly by the person it concerns, you know? And so today I think there's this there's a turning against that, for example, you could in today's times, how dare Lee Chang-dong make a movie about this condition when he doesn't have it? You know what I mean? Like, there is that little bit of dialogue that's going on today, which I feel takes art in the wrong direction, to be honest, because I'm like, no, he should be able to explore that, just even though he's not. But I just think that I just wanted to ask you just to see how you answer.
Yeah, what you said in the end, that was something I was gonna just bring up as well. That again, there's of course, for example, the woman character here can play someone who has cerebral palsy, but the actress herself doesn't have cerebral palsy, and that's obviously something that I think in 2020s many people would find problematic, and I'm a bit kind of in the middle with that issue. Not, I mean, I hate to be in the middle because it sounds so cowardly. But I can kind of see both views, and I think my mind has changed a bit. And obviously, that can apply to like gay characters. Like some people say that like you should hire a gay actor to play a gay character because he can do a more authentic performance. But then I think we have seen straight people portray gay characters well as well. So it's really interesting question. And then also, like you just talked about how again Lee Chang-dong himself obviously doesn't have these things, so whether he should be allowed to explore it, but I think he should be. But of course there is this issue that often when you expose something that you maybe don't understand that well, that you will have a kind of well problematic portrayal of it, or very kind of hurtful portrayal of it, and not very authentic portrayal of it, and the portrayal can kind of make something seem completely different than it actually is. And I think that's often the case with many of these type of things, like again, straight people write gay characters in a very stereotypic way, and also like if you have like a white director, white writer, and they make up like a film about, I don't know, Compton in Los Angeles, about like black culture there, so obviously it won't be as authentic and you won't understand it fully from your outsider perspective. But sometimes the outsider lens can also be helpful, and through the outsider lens you can sometimes get to some truth about the thing that maybe you don't see from the inside.
I mean, you're absolutely right. And like you, yes, I don't blame you by saying, oh, you're in the middle. I don't think it's cowardly. I think it's because it's complex. You can't really say, oh, it should just be that and only that, because it doesn't work when you think about it that way. So yeah, it's definitely one of those questions, and that's not a clear answer, but always worth discussing when we go into such challenging cinema. But yeah, as you mentioned with the actors, I mean, the unreal performance, right? I think like the physicality that she created, it's just like, it was just unbelievable, to the point where even her feet and her legs are engaged, like that kind of 100% full body commitment. I don't know. That's a lot of intensity to do what she did physically, and that must have been really grueling and really taxing, and needs to be recognized and applauded.
I think
and I also go ahead.
I think she got lots of recognition for it back when the film came out, and I think she even got some awards for it. And of course back then it wasn't seen as problematic as it is today, that again person without disabilities plays someone with disabilities.
Yeah.
But what were you gonna say?
I forgot. It doesn't matter. It'll come back around. It's not that important what I was going to say. Yeah, I mean, you're definitely like, as we're discussing things, I'm like obviously thinking through the film again, and I can see all that, and I feel like, yeah, I'll look forward to seeing other Lee Chang-dong films, because maybe it's just also about me clarifying where he's coming from and what he's trying to do. Like you said, he seems to like putting the unredeemable on, and then they going through a series of things that are supposed to redeem them, but they don't actually redeem themselves in the viewer's eye. It's actually very, very interesting exploration, and a very important lens, because it takes us away from romanticism, right? By always seeing characters that ultimately have to do what our idealized romanticism or whatever wants them to do, struggle in a certain way, do things in a certain way, so that you feel better about them. And I think as we also like developed and discussed, I think he does that too. He doesn't necessarily redeem people, and creates very sometimes hard to reach, hard to fully grasp characters. Um, so I think that is important, and I do think what Lee Chang-dong has done in this film is important, and what he's exploring, as you're mentioning, in his cinema is important. And I think it's just a matter of me kind of maybe also getting used to it a bit. Same way with Rivette too. It's like I think there's certain things that are not auto connect, uh, and everyone's going to have those, and it's a more slower growing with a particular piece of work or a particular artist.
And I think we could also talk about the male performance here. I think it's really
Yeah,
good. Like he has so many of those small gestures and facial expressions. Like he's constantly doing this with his nose and stuff. Like
yeah.
kind of small things that, and those kind of like the small things were kind of many of the things that made me think about those like real life people that you see in the streets and stuff. Because
Yeah,
yeah, and it makes him like so human, and like an actual. You feel like he's an actual person when he does that and really commits to like even those small details. So
yeah, yeah. I think it's very interesting. Yeah, film also reminded me. It's to me it felt like it was also kind of connecting with films like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, like different kinds of what we characterize as insanity, and different forms or types of people that society decides to just ignore or put away or institutionalize and not really think about. And then them also, amoral characters in some ways are always interesting as well, because they are not constrained. So he in some ways is not constrained by what we'd be constrained by, um, which helps us understand society better, where it works, where it doesn't work, uh, where there are blind spots. So I think, yeah, all in all, I think that exploration is very important. And like I said, that I actually don't. It's not a feeling where I would say, if someone says, "Oh yeah, I think this is amazing film," yeah, I wouldn't have any problem with that actually. Um, it's not like that. It's more like I'm trying to dial in more and more and more into the vision. Yeah,
yeah, and I think you could argue that this is one of those films that it's more interesting to talk about it than watch it in a way, because it raises just so many of these questions that you could go into, like again the problematic thing. You could talk about that for hours, and like like the kind of relationship between like those kind of problematic scenes and the whole quality of the whole kind of work. Like whether a 2 minute scene should ruin a whole movie. I think that's a conversation that one could talk about a lot. And then also that whether only disabled people should like act as disabled characters in films, and that discussion is something very interesting. So, and then this idea of the morality, that whether these are people have kind of free will and stuff, like there's so many of these like absolutely huge topics that one could go into. Yeah, so it
Yeah,
definitely succeeds in the way that it manages to ask these huge questions. So
definitely succeeds. And one thing is the film made me very uncomfortable because I think one of the challenges for me connecting with the film was clearly there's humor in the film. And there's some of the things the guy is doing is humorous, and maybe some of the things she's saying is humorous, or the situation is humorous, but it's just that kind of uncomfortable that when you laugh, you feel really self-conscious. What are you laughing at? And so that makes you a bit, it made me feel a bit guarded. And then that takes away from the film because, and maybe I'm being overly sensitive in those considerations. But yeah, I do always feel that line, that it's like, haha, but is it the way she's saying it? Is it her physical mannerisms that make it more funny? Then what are you laughing at? And I think that makes the film a bit taxing because you're like a bit scared to laugh at his insanity and even her quirks. So yeah, it's definitely a very challenging film. I think you have to be a little bit like more easygoing and then go with it and not think too much about everything. Then I think it's okay. But if you think a lot, then like us, where you think a lot and you have a lot of like thinking about this thing, other thing, then it can become very taxing because you're just constantly uncomfortable and you can't get into the flow of what's going on.
yeah, I can totally understand that, and there are many kind of films and many kind of pieces of art where you feel uncomfortable and you feel like maybe I shouldn't enjoy this, and you kind of guard yourself from it. But for me, it often happens that yeah, something makes me uncomfortable, and I'm kind of asking myself, why am I liking this so much? But then I ended up liking it anyway, like I talked about in my kind of previous video a bit about that. So yeah,
Yeah.
but I can totally understand where you're coming from with that, and especially like with these types of characters, you are thinking that did I just laugh about maybe the joke that the character made, or do I laugh about their condition? And obviously, you shouldn't laugh about people who have disabilities and stuff. But so it's like very understandable when like you watch this and you are a bit guarded and feel a bit awkward about also who you are as a person when you are watching it and how you react to those people.
Yeah, because it's like even that family dinner scene, it is a bit funny, right?
Yeah.
That he can't see that how he's just gonna show up and like what the contrast is going to be between who's at the dinner and him and who he's bringing, right? So it is funny, right? And and them being like, how am I supposed to address like who have you brought? Like they're kind of like, what the heck are you doing? Like, why have you brought this word? But they have to address it in a way because they're still in this like there's this propriety. So I think that's interesting too because I think people who are offended against and on the outsides, they've seen it all, so they're less likely to get offended by some kind of new reaction that just mirrors reactions they've had their whole life. Whereas in the people think they're being very clever by trying to mask it and still act proper, but while totally being like, get rid of her. We don't want to see that at our dinner table, essentially. Or you've just done this to like purposely like offend us, and so these kinds of things. So there's a lot of subtle things in there going on too in the film.
Yeah, that really shows kind of the way how he just really doesn't know how to
Yeah,
act around people, how he doesn't have the etiquette that your average person has. Yeah, but yeah, it's kind of funny in a weird way. Yeah.
and in a way, we'd all operate like that. Like, let's say it was a dinner, and I, you know, don't kind of connect with the people at the dinner. Of course, I would like bring someone along that I can relate to, so I don't have to feel that social anxiety and have someone I can connect with there, so I feel more comfortable. So I think there are things in his behavior that yeah, makes sense, but he also does things and you're like, man, you're just making life harder for yourself, dude. But he can't appreciate that, so how can you blame him for that too? So oh god, what a tough film. What a tough film in a way.
That makes me kind of think of one awkward dinner of my own life in like the end of ninth grade, so just before high school. I was 16, and then like there was this last kind of lunch at the school before it ended, and I had to sit in the same table with some of the people who have like bullied me and stuff. And
Oh no.
then they kind of, I mean, they didn't like bully me at that moment, and they were just asking like, "What are you gonna do after this? Like, which high school are you gonna do?" And we kind of had like a normal
Mm,
discussion, but that was so weird, kind of when you have like people you aren't like
yeah,
at all comfortable with, like having a lunch or whatever. So yeah,
yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I hear
and
you.
of course those family dinners, especially when you have like maybe some more distant family coming, like cousins or something that you see like very rarely. Like those moments are, at least for me, are so awkward, and I don't really like them.
Yeah, and I really admire that. You know, that you. I noticed. I think you're really open about in some ways that experience. So I think that allows you greater openness when you are watching films with these kinds of characters. I think it's harder if it's because your own self denial or right like what you said, and that reminded me now what I was going to say before. I really liked your point about what you said about her fantasy, and you are like, well, we all have these random thoughts, and I think you're absolutely right that um, no matter what, you it could be so far from your current reality, but because and that's again like the question, is it society that programs that into you so that the only fantasy you see is the what is normal by society standards, so that becomes your fantasy to just be that version of normal. If society and these advertising all these things didn't impose that on you, would you see the same fantasy? Probably not. And we don't know what it would even look like, so I think you're right that those moments are reflective of what we all feel. We all then look at someone else and then we say, oh, and then I could be doing that, versus what's my version of fun or connection, or it might not look like that, but what would I actually, but, and we don't know. We can't answer that question because we're so inundated and programmed and gaslit most of our life that we don't even know what would come out of us authentically if we were taken out of all of that. So yeah, I think that's a, you make some really good points, and I really do admire your perspective and your openness to understand certain kinds of characters. I've noticed that in many films um, that I have trouble connecting with certain characters, but you have a different perspective and openness to them, which I really admire.
Yeah, I do like to look at art like in a very personal way, like, try to relate to it like people I've met in my life, and also like trying to be very introspective about my own person and own emotions and experiences, and then trying to relate that to the art. And of course that's kind of what we talked about like almost a year ago with the kind of self-empathy and empathy and
Mm,
things like that you can relate to art. So that's definitely my approach to art, whether we talk about music or literature or film. And I think film is a very one of the best art forms to do that, as you have the kind of visual element and you really get to see like what these people are all about. And I think TV shows are also really good for it when you see like these longer character arcs with people and you really get to know them. And that's why I often say with certain films and TV shows that the characters kind of start feeling like your own family. Like that's how I feel about the OC, that I almost like live in that alternative reality because I know the people so well. Like they are so big part of me, and I can totally kind of see how they feel about things, even when the people might be very different to me. So.
Yeah. No, I think that's really important. Yeah, I'm gonna think about this more.
Yeah.
Looking forward. Actually, yeah. After our discussion, I think after some time, I will have to watch it again.
And I think we will return to Lee Chang-dong at some point in the podcast again. He has also some like range in his filmography, so they aren't like all like Oasis. And I think his latest film, Burning, is kind of one film that really separates it from these other films. So that might actually be a interesting one to do next because it's so different. And I actually saw that one in the cinema in London. I haven't seen it since, so it's been a long time, but I still remember it quite vividly. So.
Yeah, it's good. I think thanks to you, I have like almost all. You said he has like 6 films, so in this set I have 3. Then I have Burning, and then I have Secret Sunshine. So I have 5 films, thanks to your recommendation. So
yeah, his first film, Greenfish, isn't really available on physical media, and that's definitely, I think, his weakest film, but it's still like a pretty good one.
Yeah, so okay. Looking forward to it. And even Secret Sunshine, what you're saying, it's actually really intriguing. I really want to see that now.
Yeah, and as you are a Criterion elitist, you want to prioritize the films that are in the Criterion collection. So that's the only one that's
Criterion elitist.
And somehow you dare to blind buy that as well. So just because your friend recommended it to you. So.
Yeah, I blind bought this. Yeah, based on your recommendation.
And it wasn't a very cheap box set either. So. Yeah, I can see it in your screen in the upper right corner.
Yeah, exactly. It's like sitting there.
And you see a good range of box sets and Fassbinder and even Columbo, yeah.
Columbo. Yeah. Then I got the Scorsese World Cinema. I got 2 of them.
Yeah, I really would love to get those at some point. Like many of them have like some films that I have seen, but also many films that I really want to see.
Yeah. Some of your mentions, the ones you like, are in there, like River Called Titus and all that.
Yeah. And Columbo is a series that all of my family members were obsessed about in the day, so I had to watch some of it as a kid.
It's for Peter Falk.
Yeah, I love Peter Falk from all the Cassavetes stuff, like Woman Under the Influence, and then the Elaine May film, Mikey and Nikki, that I liked a lot. So he's like really cute in this.
I never watched Columbo before this. It's just people are talking about it a lot, so I started watching some of it, and it really helps my anxiety. So whenever I'm in a very anxious state and I can't get rest and all this, I watch an episode and I like calm down. So it has a calming effect. So it's a very practical thing, and I just love Peter Falk, even though he's doing a shtick, as he said himself. That actors kind of hate that because they have to just do the shtick, right? He doesn't get to. That's in the Cassavetes movies. He got to challenge himself, but here he gets to just do the shtick. But he's so great. He's just so fun to watch in this show. So definitely not like whatever, like, but yeah, it's a good entertainment.
Yeah, and it's a good contrast because under it you have Twin Peaks, which is full of horror, but one that brings anxiety and one that brings you out of it. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, anyway, that's brief rant is included in the podcast itself. So, but now we can wrap this Oasis part and actually now announce that there's a bonus episode coming. So we will do Bellatar's Damnation, but I will explain it in that video, like why we are doing the bonus episode. So yeah, look out for that. And then in the end of Damnation, I will announce what we will do a couple of weeks after that. So yeah.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, but very fascinating conversation with Oasis. So yeah, thanks for watching. Let us know what you think of Late Changdong or any of these interesting questions that we talked about during this discussion. Don't drink Coke at all. Sayonara and arigato gozaimashita.